Hello, my name is Katie and welcome to my video. Today I'm filming my October wrap-up. October was actually a very good reading month for me. I filmed a wrap-up for the first 2 weeks of the month because I had enough books that I felt I could split them up and still have decent length videos. I didn't want to be sitting filming my wrap-up for an hour. What I am going to do is run through my October stats. This will include the books that I read in the first half of the month. And it's also going to include a couple of books that I'm not talking about in this video because I am doing a separate video with them. So first things first, all my stats are from the Story Graph. If you haven't heard of the Story Graph, it's kind of like Goodreads in that it lets you track your reading, except I'm finding it to be a lot more fun than Goodreads because it gives you more options when it comes to reviewing books, such as you don't have to stick with a star rating between 1 and 5. You can do, like 0.25s and 0.5s and 0.75s, which I think is really cool. And then it also allows you to select like characteristics of the book. Like it gives you a list of moods to choose from to say like how the book felt to you. Was it thrilling? Was it challenging? Was it adventurous? Things like that. And then it also lets you choose if the book was fast-paced or slow-paced. It has drop-downs for things like character development, diversity within the characters. It's really cool. So you can fill out that and then you don't necessarily have to come up with your own review for the book, but you can still put a little bit more information out there about it. It also comes with these awesome graphs that I'm going to be inserting when I go over my stats, just to kind of help you track your reading a little bit more. So in the month of October, I read 18 books for a total of 6,275 pages. As far as page count breakdown with the books, 6 of them were less than 300 pages, 10 of them were between 300 and 499 pages, and 2 of them were 500 plus pages. I read 2 nonfiction and 16 fiction in the month. That ratio might be a little bit off from what I usually read, but it was because I knew I would be reading a lot more nonfiction in November, so I tried to mostly stick with the fiction that I wanted to get through. Genres that I read from. Now I'm pretty sure, I should have the graph up here, that the way they do this is that different books can fit into multiple categories, because if you look, this is way more books than I actually read in the month. So I think certain books fit into different genres and therefore they have slotted that book into both genres, is what I think is happening. So yes, the numbers are off, but it still gives you kind of an idea of what I mostly read this month. Unsurprisingly, I read 7 mysteries in the month of October, 6 historical books in the month of October. I'm not sure if by historical they mean historical fiction or if they're also including nonfiction that's history in that. I read 5 YA books, 4 thrillers, 4 fantasy, 3 children's books, 2 history books. I think the history books might be like the nonfiction history books that I read. 2 biographies, which I don't know if I agree with that, because I wouldn't have considered any book that I read this month to be a biography. But anyway, 1 romance and 1 horror. As far as my ratings go, I had 4 of them that I didn't rate, and we'll get into that when we get to those. I have 1 that I rated 1 star, 3 that I rated 3 stars, 2 that got 3.5 star rating, 1 that was a 4 star, 2 that were 4.5 stars, and 4 that were 5 stars. The only thing that's unusual about those ratings for me is that I don't usually give out 1 star ratings. That is I can probably count on one hand the amount of 1 star ratings I've given over the years. So let's get into the books, shall we? Now, like I said, I already did a wrap up for the first half of the month. I will link that, so if you would like to go watch that, you can. So this is starting from roughly the 16th of October till the 31st. The first book I read in that span was The Bookshop of the Brokenhearted by Robert Hillman. I did not rate this book because I think a lot of the issues that I was having reading it weren't the book's fault, it was the mood I was in. So because of that, I don't feel like I could give it a fair rating. This book centers on a man called Tom Hope. He has gone through some hard times recently. He lives in rural Australia. It's 1960s-ish. And he has had a lot of issues with his wife. She eventually leaves him. This happens within the first couple chapters, so it's not a spoiler or anything. He then meets this woman. Her name is Hannah. She's from Hungary, and she has come to this town to kind of get a fresh start. She's opening a bookstore, and she is determined to make this bookstore work. The two meet, and they fall in love. It's an interesting dynamic because Tom has led quite an isolated life, and a fairly sheltered one as well. While he knew that World War II was happening, it didn't affect him anywhere near as much as it did Hannah, who was living in Hungary. So they struggle a little bit in their relationship with each other because Tom just doesn't understand a lot of the things that Hannah has been through. This wasn't a bad book. It wasn't unenjoyable. I just really don't have that much to say about it. I've forgotten a lot about it at this point. It's only been a couple weeks, so. Next book I finished was The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. I also didn't rate this one because there were a lot of things in this that really just grossed me out and like set my teeth on edge. And it's a thriller, so that's supposed to happen. And so I really don't know that I could give it a fair rating because of my feelings in regards to certain things that happened. I think they fit with the story. I think it added to the overall sense of doom, I guess. But because I'm still struggling with how I really feel about that, I just honestly don't know what to rate it. So this book follows a man. He is roughly in his 40s, I believe. He still lives in the same town he grew up in. He is teaching at the school that he went to. It flashes back between present day and him and his teaching job and his past as about an 11-year-old kid, I think, and some of the things that happened during this one summer. I really don't know how to talk about this without giving away spoilers, so I'm just going to try to keep it vague. When the main character and his friends were kids, they developed a way of just like talking to each other through code. They each had their own special color of chalk, and they would leave each other symbols that would be messages to meet someplace or to beware because there's bullies around, things of that nature. A lot happens that summer. Someone ends up murdered, and everything seems to kind of sort itself out in the end. However, now we're like 25 or so years later, and he receives a message with a chalk man on it. And it seems like maybe the things of the past weren't quite as resolved as he thought they were. The other thing that was weird about this was the ending. I didn't think they needed to go there with it. It didn't really add to anything. But it is what it is. This wasn't a bad read. I'd probably read more from C.J. Tudor again, just because it was pretty fast-paced and it definitely kept me interested. So I'm not opposed to reading from this author in the future. The next book I finished was The Wives by Tarryn Fisher. I very nearly unhauled this book. And then someone in my comment section told me that they really liked the twist that happened in this. And so I kept it and I read it and I gave it 5 stars. This was probably a perfect thriller for me in terms of content, the sense of not quite knowing what's going on and wanting to find out the truth. And then also in terms of the twist ending and what actually happened, it was intense. And when the twist came, I did not believe it at first. I didn't believe it. I kept thinking, no, there's no way, there's no way. And then as things came to light, I was like, oh my, really? Wow. It was, it was so good. We're following a woman, and she is married to this man, and they are in, I don't want to call it a polyamorous relationship because none of the wives know each other. He just has multiple wives. Obviously, she's intensely curious about these other women, obviously. And she decides she has to see the one of them. So she does, and they kind of strike up a friendship. And then things start getting really weird. And I don't want to say anything more than that because it's a thriller, and the more you give away, the less fun it's going to be to read. But oh my, I don't even know. I sat there at the end and I didn't even know how to function for a while. I was just shell-shocked. The next book I read I had on ebook. It was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I saw Brittany from Literarily Smitten. I will link her channel in the description box. She did a review of the book, and then she also watched the new Netflix film and did kind of a discussion on that, so I will try to link that video as well. And I decided I really needed to read the book. So I got it on Kindle because it's faster than trying to order it, and I was immediately hooked. I don't read a ton of books that would be considered classics. I think I've always been a little bit afraid to because they're so different in some respects. A lot of times the language is different, the atmosphere is kind of different. So I tend to shy away from them, but wow. That book was so worth the read. I gave it 5 stars, which I might have said already. I don't know. But anyway, if you don't know, Rebecca centers on this estate called Manderley, and its owner is Maxim de Winter, and he meets this woman. She's quite young, quite a bit younger than he is, and he ends up marrying her. She is his second wife. His first wife, Rebecca, is still so very present at Manderley, and it really throws the new wife very off. She's very insecure about her position and how she measures up to Rebecca, and all the things that people in the town and the people who run the house, all the things they say about her just make her feel even less sure of herself. It was haunting. It was a lot creepy in certain areas. And then the ending was so tense. And this thing happened, which I can't tell you about because it was a spoiler. But I was just like, what? I did not see it coming. I even thinking back, hindsight being 2020, I still don't see it coming. But it makes so much sense. Once you read that part, you're like, oh my god, yeah. By the time I got to the end of the book, I pretty much just sat on my couch catatonic, trying to process everything that had just happened and wondering if I just needed to read it again. Highly recommend it if you haven't already read it. Less so do I recommend the Netflix movie. But anyway, if you haven't picked up the book, you really should, and I myself plan to pick up much more Daphne du Maurier in the future. The next book I finished was The Last Castle, the epic story of love, loss, and American royalty in the nation's largest home. This was everything I wanted it to be. I read a book called Empty Mansions earlier in the month and was hoping that it was going to give me what this gave me, which is essentially a look at Gilded Age America. However, in this particular book, it's all centered around the Biltmore estate, which is the house that George Vanderbilt built in North Carolina. This was so good. Somehow, Denise Kiernan managed to take several different stories and weave them all together. And I think it was because she centered it on Biltmore. What she did was she took all the lives of these incredible people and discussed them in the context of their visits to Biltmore. So the book starts out discussing George Vanderbilt and his decision to start building Biltmore, but then it also follows the woman who eventually becomes his wife. And even though these are two completely separate storylines, you still feel that they are connected. It never feels like a massive disconnect is happening while you're reading it. It also talks about several famous authors, like Edith Wharton is discussed. She went to Biltmore. There was, I think, 2 presidents that went to Biltmore. Absolutely great. So fabulous. I really recommend this to anybody who is looking to read something on Gilded Age America. The next book I read was Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. I didn't rate this one because, again, I think the problem was my mood. When I started this, I was absolutely hooked, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be a 5-star read. But then I hit, I'm not going to call it a reading slump because I was reading other things at the time that I was enjoying. I think it was I just didn't want to be reading fantasy at that moment. So I put this down for a bit and then really had to push myself to pick it back up. And objectively speaking, just looking at the way the story was crafted, the plot, the characters, I know that I'm the problem. I couldn't really point to anything that was wrong with that would be, making me not want to read it. So I'm not going to rate this, at least not right now, because I just don't know. The way my mood was really diminished my enjoyment of it. But I'm pretty sure it was just my mood and not the book itself. So this book, wow. I've read books before that are supposed to be based around African mythology and take place in an African country. And to be honest, a lot of them don't really feel that African inspired to me. A Song of Wraith and Ruin specifically, I read over the summer, and it was good, but it didn't feel like it took place like anywhere outside of the norm from any other fantasy. This one, you could feel the African influences, the way that music played such a large role in worship, the way that the clothing really defined different tribes and things like that was great. Even the way the names were done, really, it just felt authentic. I felt like I was reading a book that took place in an alternate / fantasy Africa type world. And I really liked that. This book is largely centered on Tarryn, and she is entered as a candidate to become a part of the prince's council. So how it works in this world is there's the prince, and he is the Raybearer. He has this ray, and he chooses a council member from each of the, I'm not sure if they're actually referred to as tribes in the book, I can't remember, but that's more or less what they are. And so there's 11 people on his council and then him. And with each candidate that's chosen, he sends out his ray to them, which is, I never really quite understood how that worked, but I think it's supposed to be kind of mythical in a way. And anyway, if they accept the ray and allow him to anoint them, they become a part of his council. They form this intense attachment with the other council members where they are more than family. It's very bizarre. Like, not being with each other can lead to what's known as council sickness, so it can have actual physical effects to not be together. The other thing that's interesting about how that works is with each new person that's anointed, the prince, or he's going to be the king or emperor or something one day, he has one more, how do I put this? There is one more way in which he cannot die. So in this world, there are essentially only 13 ways to die. One of them is old age. The prince or emperor or whatever is born with one thing that he cannot die from, be it poison, fire, whatever. And with each council member that he anoints, he gains whatever they're impervious to. So that at the end, when he has his full council, the only thing he can die from is old age. The caveat to this is that the council members could kill him. Now, in theory, they're not supposed to do this because in order to accept the ray and be anointed, you have to truly love the prince. However, there are ways around that, and the book, that's basically what the plot centers on. Very interesting. There were a lot of things that I didn't quite see coming, and I think I'm going to reread this one when I'm in a different mood, when I am more interested in reading fantasy, because overall it was enjoyable. I really just think it was a me problem. The next book I read was the one I gave 1 star to, and that's The Body in the Attic by Judi Lynn. I don't even know where to start. I picked this up as an audiobook because I got it for like 99 cents, which should have been my first clue. This was terrible. It's a cozy mystery, which I don't read a ton of. However, I have read them and enjoyed them. And it just felt like something that I would like to kind of dive into. It feels like it's kind of a safe space for me when it comes to reading, and it's cozy and, you know. But, ugh. I don't even know where to start. Okay, I'll just start with a synopsis. Our main character, her name is Jazzy. She and her cousin Jared are house flippers. So they buy this house, and the house belonged to a man that Jazzy's aunt was engaged to many, many years ago. Now, Jazzy's aunt disappeared, and of course they find her body in the house. And this happens in like chapter 1, so it's not spoilers, although why you would want to read this, I don't know. That part was fine, although the mystery was ridiculous. There were some other aspects that were ridiculous, however, they're kind of like standard fare in a cozy mystery, so I'm not going to even hate on them because that's just part of the genre. What I really, really, really disliked was the romance. There is this contractor who works with Jazzy and Jared on houses, and Jazzy has the hots for him. Oh boy, does she have the hots for him. At one point, she sees him with his shirt off, and like the way she objectifies him, it honestly feels like a man wrote this book. It really set my teeth on edge. But I pressed on. Then, something happens with the contractor and his girlfriend kicks him out and he needs someplace to stay for the night, so he stays with Jazzy, yada yada yada. She says something along the lines of she wants to put something in his food to knock him out so she can sneak into his room and have her way with him. That's rape. Just because your character is a female doesn't make it any more okay to do something like that than it would if it was a man as the main character. That's not okay. It's not okay to knock people out so you can do sexual things with them. I don't care if it's a man that's being knocked out. It's still rape. So that right there, I was already like, okay, can't do this, won't do this, don't want to do this. Then, Boy Toy finally dumps his girlfriend. Cool. He and Jazzy immediately get together, but not really. He says that he's wanted to take her to bed for a long time. And she's just like, "Ooh, you like me." No, he's saying he wants to sleep with you. That doesn't mean he likes you. Like, I just don't understand how, like, what about that is romantic? It was being presented as though it were supposed to be romantic, but it wasn't. And then she decides to start telling people that they're just friends with benefits. That's what they're doing. He's living in your house. He's sleeping in your bed. You're cooking him dinner. You are not friends with benefits. You are in a relationship. Just say you're in a relationship then. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. Then there's a really cringy, made me like physically cringe, this line. They're watching a scary movie and he said, you know what? I wrote it down. He says, the antidote to fear is lots of heavy breathing and making love. What the fuck? Ew! You couldn't have just said the antidote to fear is making love? Okay, one, it's not. And two, what was necessary about the heavy breathing? Like, ugh, why would you say that? I don't understand. I don't understand. So now to get into my gripes about this book that were not about the romance. The characters are so black and white. The good guys are like halo shining angels, and the bad guys are like mustache twirly like villains. Like there's no in between. Even people that shouldn't really even be villainized, they should just be like secondary characters who maybe aren't the best. The author takes it so far in the negative direction or in the positive direction, depending on the case, that it's like, what happened to three-dimensional characters? Why are these characters, they have one defining characteristic. That's it. That does not a good character make. Add to that most of the dialogue sounds exactly like it came out of a Pokemon game. It was bad. It was so bad. And then my final complaint is like a small one, very small one. This book is set in Indiana, and at one point they drive into Michigan for something. I am from Michigan, and I have taken that drive from Indiana into Michigan several times in my life. And I don't think the author ever has. She said something to the effect of, as we left the lush greenness of Indiana and entered the pine trees of Michigan. Okay, when you leave Indiana and drive into Michigan, it looks exactly the same. Exactly the same. You really don't get all like the pine tree-ness for like a while. And even still, they have like pine trees in Indiana. So I don't understand that. And then she mentions the Welcome to Michigan sign. And I looked. This book was written in 2018. As far as I know, every sign I have ever seen when entering Michigan does not say Welcome to Michigan. It says Pure Michigan on it. But anyway, that's probably not something that would bother most people. I just happen to be from there. So let's move on, because I could talk about this for days, and I don't have the time to do that right now. The final book I finished in October is one that I'd actually been working on since September? Like the beginning of September, I think. Yeah, it's been a while. and that is Babylon's Ashes by James S. A. Corey. This is book 6 in the Expanse series. I gave this one 3 stars. This was not the strongest entry in the series, I guess. For one, there are way too many points of view. Usually we get like maybe 5 throughout the book. This had somewhere between 15 and 20. Like, so many points of view. And the certain characters that I actually cared a lot about because I've been following them for a while or we've had them in other books, those chapters I really liked and they were easy to get through. But then other chapters, I was just like, a lot of them I just didn't see the point. I still, even now, I don't understand why they were in there because they didn't seem to add much to the book, and I feel as though we could have gotten that information from, like, existing character. We didn't need a whole new point of view to put that little bit of information in. Obviously, I can't say a whole lot about this one because it's book 6. One thing I did think was cool, I picked this up at a used bookstore, and I had no idea that it's actually signed. And I thought that was really cool. But yes, one thing I did kind of want to mention that happened in this that really meant a lot to me was near the beginning, there's this scene. And I guess I should give you some background. So our main character is James Holden. He captains the Rocinante, which is a ship, and they kind of do odd jobs, I guess. They work a lot for various governments within the universe. And he is from Earth, and she's not really like his wife, but they've been together for a very, very long time at this point. She is from the asteroid belt. That's where she was born. That's where she grew up. And in this world, at this point in time, the Belters, as they're known as, are essentially a race of their own. They are largely looked down upon by people who live on Earth, the Moon, and Mars. And there are, at this point, actual physical differences between people born in the belt and people born on Earth simply because of the, less gravity and things that they don't get exposed to because they're not on Earth. So, near the beginning, James Holden and his I'm calling her his wife. Anyway, Naomi, they're visiting Holden's family, and his dad makes a very insensitive remark about Belters. He doesn't mean any harm by it. He's not directing it at Naomi. He just said it. And I have been in a kind of similar situation, and Holden immediately starts to speak up to say, like, hey, you shouldn't say those things. It's insensitive, it's rude, and it's wrong. And Naomi kind of stops him and just kind of ends the conversation, and they leave. And he's like, I wish you would have let me say something. Like, I don't want people thinking they can talk to you that way. And she's like, look, I just didn't want to turn a very nice visit right at the end, have it turn into something that is negative because of me. And he's like, I understand that, and, that's, you're right if that's what you want to do. He goes, just know that I would have said something if you hadn't stopped me. And she's like, I know. And this weighs on him for a very long time. And he eventually decides that he needs to do something about it. So what he does is he puts together kind of a media campaign in which he goes to places throughout the asteroid belt, and he just films the people talking and living their lives and does little interviews with them. Just a lot of just human interest stories. And then he sends them throughout the galaxy. And this catches on. People from a lot of places start doing this. And it's a little bit kitschy and adorable and whatever else. But I thought it was so nice and so good that they would include something like that in this book, where essentially a racial slur was made, and he couldn't sit with it. He wanted to do something to show people that the Belters were not just whatever you think they are. They're humans, and they do the same types of things that everybody else does. And I really, really liked that about this book. And that kind of saved it for me overall. So let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Do you feel the same as me? Differently? Let's talk. Also in the comments, let me know if you would like to read any of these books now. If you like my content, subscribe. Stick around. I'd love to see you in my comments. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.